The air inside the galactic tribunal chamber felt heavy, like the entire room was holding its breath. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds sat in their seats, their strange eyes and lenses fixed on the raised platform in the center. Every species had sent representatives to watch this trial, some for justice, some for entertainment, and some because they simply could not believe what they had heard. A Deathworlder was on trial. 2 guards in black armor stood at the sides. Of the platform, between them, hands bound in thick energy cuffs, was a human. His name was Lieutenant Daniel Rourke, but very few here knew that name. Most just called him the prisoner from Earth. He was tall for a human, with a strong jaw, short dark hair, eyes that seemed to look right through anyone who stared at him. On the far side of the platform stood Commander Vexer of the Zorathi Empire. The Zorathi were tall reptilian beings. With scaled skin and long, curved claws, Vexer wore a polished black officer's uniform, medals glittering across his chest. He was a decorated commander, feared for his cruelty, proud of it. Vexer stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the human. "You stand accused of assault, sabotage, and murder." His voice boomed, translated instantly into dozens of languages. "Through the chamber's systems, you are a threat to the peace of this galaxy. You are nothing but an animal." Rourke didn't answer. He just stood there, silent, his eyes locked on Vexer's face. The silence seemed to irritate the commander. His nostrils flared. "I will not be mocked by some savage from a backwater world," he snarled. Then it happened. Vexer stepped right up to Rourke, close enough for the human to feel the heat from his scaled skin. In one sharp, deliberate motion, the commander raised his hand and struck Rourke across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the chamber. It was sharp, loud, and shocking. Several diplomats gasped. Others leaned forward in fascination for 2 long seconds. No one moved. Rourke's head had turned with the blow, but slowly, very slowly, he brought his face back toward Vexer. A red mark had formed on his cheek. His eyes were steady, unblinking. Then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was slow, deliberate, and dangerous. The kind of smile a predator might give before striking. Vexer's expression flickered just. For a moment of doubt, Rourke's voice was calm, almost quiet, but it carried across the chamber. That was a mistake. Before the guards could react, Rourke moved. It was like a sudden shift in the air. One moment he was standing there, chained and still. The next he had twisted his arms, snapping the energy cuffs in a single motion. The sound of the shattering cuffs rang like a gunshot. Gasps erupted from the audience. The guards reached for their weapons, but they were too slow. Rourke lunged forward, his hands snapping up to grip Vexer's wrists before the commander could. "Pull back." Vexer tried to pull away, but Rourke was already moving. With a sharp twist and a step forward, he drove his shoulder into the alien's chest, unbalancing him. Then his other hand came up not to punch, but to grip the side of Vexer's head. The human's movements were fast, brutal, and without hesitation. In one swift, horrifying motion, he twisted. There was a sickening crack. The commander's body collapsed to the floor, headless, and the head rolled across the pristine marble of the tribunal floor, coming to a stop at the base of the High Council's podium. Silence. Absolute silence. Hundreds of alien delegates stared, frozen in disbelief. The only sound was the faint hum of the translator systems. Rourke straightened, breathing steadily. His hands were bloody, but his expression was calm, almost serene. He looked around at the chamber, meeting the Izor equivalent of as many delegates as he could. "Never," he said, his voice low but steady. "Strike a Deathworlder." The words sent a chill through the room. Some delegates looked away. Others leaned back as if to distance themselves from the human. Then chaos erupted. Guards shouted orders. Security drones zipped into the air. The chamber filled with movement, as beings scrambled either toward the exits or toward the platform, but Rourke didn't run. He stood there, as if daring anyone to approach. 2 guards rushed him from the side, weapons drawn. Rourke sidestepped the first, grabbing his arm and using his momentum to flip him over onto the marble floor. The second swung a shock baton, but Rourke caught it mid-swing, ripped it from the guard's hands, and dropped him with a sharp strike to the chest. Blaster fire lit up the air, forcing Rourke to duck behind the raised edge of the platform. Marble cracked under the shots. The crowd was in full panic now. Some delegates were shouting into communication devices, likely broadcasting the event live to their homeworlds. Others were rushing for the exits, knocking over chairs and tables. In their haste to leave, somewhere above, a holodrone was still filming, its lens fixed on the blood-stained platform. Every second of this was being recorded and streamed across the galaxy. Rourke knew it, and he wanted it that way. He moved quickly, vaulting over the platform edge and heading for the nearest guard he could see. His movements were sharp, efficient, trained. For survival in the deadliest conditions, he wasn't fighting for escape. He was fighting to send a message the galaxy would never forget. The guards tried to swarm him, but their numbers meant little in such close quarters. Rourke slammed one into the wall, disarmed another with a kick, dropped a third with a headbutt so hard the alien's helmet cracked all around. The chamber was filled with sound, now shouts, gunfire, the wailing of alarm sirens. The High Council members were being escorted out by their personal bodyguards, their faces pale with shock, in the center of it all. Vexor's head still lay on the floor, eyes open, mouth frozen in an expression of disbelief.
Ow.
Blood pooled slowly. Beneath it, dark and glistening under the bright lights. Finally, a group of heavy armored enforcers burst through the main doors, weapons leveled. These were not the ceremonial guards. They were the real deal. Their armor was thick, their weapons military grade. Rourke didn't wait for them to close in. He turned, moving toward the far exit. A blast of energy scorched the wall just inches from his shoulder. He ducked into a side corridor, boots pounding on the polished floor. Behind him, the shouts of the enforcers echoed, joined by the metallic thud of their heavy steps. The corridor curved, leading him toward a maintenance passage. The doorway, pulling it shut behind him. The narrow, dimly lit space smelled of oil and metal. Pipes and cables ran along the walls, and the sound of the chaos in the tribunal chamber was muffled here. He leaned against the wall for a moment, catching his breath. His hands were still stained with Vexor's blood. The message had been sent. The whole galaxy had seen it now. It would come for him, and that was fine, because Rourke wasn't done yet. The maintenance corridor was narrow and dim, lit only by flickering strips along the ceiling. Daniel Rourke moved quickly, boots striking. Metal grates that rattled under his weight, smell of oil and something acrid hung in the air. Somewhere far behind him, the muffled shouts of enforcers echoed through the building. Mixed with the faint hiss of cum chatter, he had only seconds before they figured out which way he'd gone. Rourke turned a corner, ducking under a low pipe, and found a service hatch, half hidden behind a coil of cables. He knelt, pulled at the latch, and felt it give way with a soft click. Beyond was a dark shaft that dropped straight down into shadow. He listened. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. Just the hum of machinery. He dropped into the shaft, landing in a crouch on a metal platform several meters below. From here, a narrow ladder led farther down into the guts of the tribunal complex. He descended fast but silent, every movement. Controlled, every step measured. When he reached the bottom, he found himself in a huge service tunnel. It was wide enough for small transport carts, and the walls were lined with pipes and access panels. Dim emergency lights glowed at intervals, leaving long stretches of shadow between them. Rourke moved into the shadows. His breathing was steady, but his mind was turning over what had just happened. Vexor's words. The slap was the moment of impact. When his own hands had ended the commander's life, the look in Vexor's eyes, shock, fear, and disbelief still burned in his memory. He had meant every word he'd said in the chamber. Never strike a Deathworlder, because if you did, you wouldn't live to regret it. A faint sound reached him from the far end of the tunnel. Footsteps, slow, careful, deliberate. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing blindly, they were hunting. Rourke slipped behind a thick pipe, letting the shadows swallow him. He crouched low, his eyes scanning the dim corridor. A shape emerged from the darkness, not an enforcer, not a guard. This one moved differently, with a certain patience. The figure wore a dark cloak, hood pulled low. The face was hidden, but the hands were bare slender. With a faint bluish hue to the skin, the figure stopped about 10 meters away and spoke. The voice low but clear. "If you want to live," the stranger said, "you need to come with me." Rourke didn't move. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what's coming next." The voice was calm, almost casual. "And someone who doesn't think you should be caught in it, at least. Not yet." "I'm not in the mood for games," Rourke replied. The hood tilted slightly, as if the stranger was studying him. "Good, because this is no game. The moment you killed Vexer, you changed the galaxy. The Empire will hunt you until the day you die, but there's something they fear even more than you." Rourke narrowed his eyes, and that is, the stranger stepped closer, just enough for the light to catch part of their face, a glimpse of sharp features and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. "The truth." Before Rourke could reply, a sharp hiss echoed from the far end of the tunnel. A squad of enforcers appeared, armored and armed, their visors glowing red in the dim light. Target located, one of them barked into a cum. The stranger turned sharply. "We're out of time. Follow me." Without waiting for an answer, the hooded figure darted into a side passage, moving quickly but silently. Rourke hesitated for only a heartbeat before following. The passage was narrow and twisting, lined with old storage crates and dusty machinery. The sound of boots and shouted orders echoed behind them as the enforcers gave chase. They reached a rusted door at the end of the passage. The stranger pressed a small device against the lock. It beeped once. Then the door slid open with a groan. On the other side was a dark chamber lit only by a single overhead light. The walls were bare metal, and in the center sat a small table with 2 chairs. The door slid shut behind them, sealing out the noise of pursuit. Rourke kept his eyes on the stranger. "You going to tell me who you are now?" The hood lowered, revealing a woman with pale blue skin and sharp silver eyes. Her hair was black and cut short, and a faint scar ran across her cheek. "My name is Lyra," she said, "and I'm part of something the Zorathi Empire doesn't want you to know about." Rourke crossed his arms. "Why should I trust you?" "Shouldn't," Lyra said without hesitation. "But you should know this, the trial today wasn't about you. It was about Earth. The Empire wanted the galaxy to see humans as dangerous, violent animals. Your death was supposed to be the proof." Rourke's jaw tightened. "And now?" "Now," Lyra said, "you've given them something even more powerful. Fear. They'll spin it. Of course they'll call you a murderer, a monster. But fear spreads faster than propaganda. And if we use that fear, we can strike back." Rourke studied her for a long moment. Her eyes didn't waver. "What's your part in this?" he asked. "I'm with the Free Systems Network," she said. "We've been fighting the Empire for years, but we've been losing. Your demonstration today might be the spark we need. But first, you have to survive the next few hours." From somewhere beyond the walls came the muffled sound of boots pounding on metal. The enforcers were still searching. Lyra moved to a panel on the far wall and pressed a hidden switch. A section of the floor slid back, revealing a narrow stairwell. "Leading down this way?" "It's an old escape route from before the tribunal was rebuilt. The Empire thinks it's sealed, but I've kept it open." Rourke glanced at the opening, then at her. "And where does it lead?" "To the Undercity," she said. "If you want to disappear, that's the place to do it." He considered it. Every instinct told him not to trust someone he'd just met. But every instinct also told him that staying here meant capture or death. Without another word, he stepped onto the stairwell. The air grew colder as they descended. The walls were rough metal, the light dim and uneven. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily. As they moved, Lyra spoke again, her voice low. "What you did today, that wasn't just self-defense, was it?" Rourke didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. "I made a promise." "To who?" "To the people I served with, to Earth, that no matter what happened to me, I'd never let them forget what a Death Worlder is capable of, even if it cost me my life." They reached the bottom of the stairwell, stepping into a long tunnel that sloped downward. The air here smelled of rust and damp stone. Lyra glanced. At him? Then you've kept your promise. And now, we'll see what it costs you next. Far above, the sound of boots and shouts faded into silence. The Undercity swallowed them, its shadows stretching ahead like a maze with no end. Rourke didn't know where the path would lead. But he knew one thing: the hunt had only just begun. The news spread faster than light. By the time Daniel, Rourke, and Lyra reached the Undercity, the holofeeds had already replayed the moment 100 times. Every angle, every detail. Vexer's hand striking the human. The pause, the smile. A sudden brutal twist that left the commander's head rolling across the tribunal floor, in the bars of the outer colonies. Crowds gathered around flickering screens to watch the replay. On the luxury stations of the core worlds, wealthy patrons sipped drinks and murmured in disbelief. Even in prison camps, inmates whispered about the Death Worlder who had killed a Zorathi commander in front of the galaxy. And in darker corners, far from the eyes of the law, 3 very different hunters were already on the move. The first was Korvek, towering reptilian mercenary with scarred scales and teeth like jagged glass. He sat in a cramped booth inside a smoke-filled cantina on the mining moon of Sersha. For his claws tapped against the tabletop as he watched the replay on a cracked HOLO- projector. When the broadcast ended, Kor smiled a slow, predatory grin. 100,000 credits, he muttered to himself. Live or dead, doesn't matter which. A bounty like that could buy a ship, a crew, and a retirement on a quiet ocean world. But Kor wasn't interested in retiring. He was interested in the hunt and a Death Worlder. That was prey worth chasing. He stood towering over the other patrons and made his way to the docking bay. His ship, the Bloodfang, was already fueled and armed. As the engines roared to life, Kor's claws flexed in anticipation. Some prey ran, some fought. Kor didn't care which Rourke would choose. The second hunter was nothing like Kor, on a glittering station orbiting the gas giant Myra 6. A woman sat in a quiet, dimly lit room. She was known only as Vera. No one knew her homeworld, her age, or even her true face. She wore a mask of polished silver that reflected the light in strange, shifting patterns. Vera watched the replay in silence, her head tilted slightly, like an artist studying a piece of work. When it ended, she reached for a glass of clear liquid and took a slow sip. Killing a Zorathi commander in front of the tribunal, she murmured. Bold, very bold. She tapped a small device on the table. A holographic map appeared, displaying the capital city of Zorath Prime. She zoomed in on the tribunal complex and then traced possible escape routes with a gloved finger. She wasn't interested in blasters or brute force. Vera preferred quiet kills, the kind where the target never saw her coming, the kind where no one could prove she had ever been there at all. And for a Death Worlder, she would bring her best tools. The third hunter was the youngest and the most dangerous in his own way. His name was Talon Jex, and he wasn't a professional bounty hunter at all. He was a street racer from the fringe world of Drevos, a place where speed meant survival and debts were paid in blood. Talon owed the wrong people a lot of money. When the bounty notice for Rourke flashed across his handheld screen, Talon saw his way out. 100,000 credits, enough to clear every debt, upgrade his racer, and maybe even buy a ticket off Drevos for good. He didn't care that Rourke was human. He didn't care about politics or the tribunal. All he saw was a payday. Talon slid into the cockpit of his patched-up scout ship, the Sky Needle, and kicked the engines into life. The ship wasn't built for combat, but it was faster than most enforcement patrols. And in a chase, speed was everything. By the time the Undercity swallowed Rourke and Lyra, the hunters were already on their way. Down in the shadowed streets, Rourke kept his hood low. The Undercity of Zorath Prime was a maze of narrow alleys, rusted platforms and flickering neon signs. The air was thick with the smell of fuel and damp metal. Every shadow seemed to watch. Lyra walked beside him, her eyes scanning every doorway and rooftop. "They'll be looking for you everywhere now," she said quietly. "They'll find 100 people who think they saw me," Rourke replied, "and most of them will be wrong." Lyra gave a thin smile. Let's make sure of that. They turned into a narrow passage where steam hissed from broken vents. Somewhere in the distance, a loudspeaker blared an announcement in the harsh Zarathi language. Rourke didn't need a translation. He could guess it was about him. They reached a small metal door, half hidden behind a row of stacked crates. Lyra knocked twice, paused, then knocked once more. A sliding panel opened, revealing a pair of suspicious eyes. "It's me," Lyra said. "Open up." The door slid open, and they stepped inside. The room beyond was dimly lit, cluttered with tools, wires, and stacks of spare parts. A wiry alien with 4 arms looked up from a workbench. "Lyra," the alien said in a raspy voice. "You brought trouble. I brought opportunity," Lyra replied. The alien's eyes flicked to Rourke. "Deathworlder," he said, almost a whisper. Rourke didn't respond. He moved to a corner where he could watch both the door and the back exit. Years of survival had taught him that trust was a rare luxury. Lyra and the alien began speaking. In low tones, trading information and credits. Rourke tuned him out and focused on the street sounds outside. Somewhere out there, he knew, someone was already hunting him. He could feel it. Far above, in the crowded traffic lanes of the upper city, Korvek's Bloodfang descended through the smog, scanners sweeping the streets. The reptilian mercenary's claws tapped the console as he studied the readouts. "Come on, Deathworlder," he growled. "Show me where you're hiding." Across the city, Vera moved like a shadow through the rooftops. Her mask glinted faintly in the neon light as she leaped from one building to the next, tracking rumors, bribes, and whispers that pointed her toward the Undercity. And in the outer atmosphere, Talon Jex's Sky Needle cut through the clouds, its engines screaming. He didn't have a plan. He had speed. And in his mind, that was enough. The hunt had begun. And it would not stop until one of them had Rourke in their hands or until he put them in the ground. The Undercity never truly slept. Even in the deepest hours of the night cycle, the narrow streets buzzed with activity. Vendors shouted in alien tongues. Steam hissed from vents overhead. Neon signs flickered, advertising everything from cheap food to illegal tech. The air was heavy with smoke, oil, and the faint metallic taste of the city's recycled air. "Daniel." Rourke moved through it like a shadow, his hood pulled low. Lyra walked beside him, her stride casual but her eyes sharp, scanning every doorway and balcony. "Keep your head down," she said under her breath. "We blend in, we live, blending." "In isn't exactly my specialty," Rourke replied quietly. "Then you'd better learn fast." They passed a street where half the stalls were shut, their metal shutters tagged with graffiti in languages Rourke didn't recognize. Somewhere in the distance, music thumped from a bar. A few faces turned to watch them as they walked by some. Curious, some calculating, Lyra led him into a narrow alley that curved sharply, its walls damp with condensation. A single light flickered above, casting long shadows. At the far end, she stopped before a door with no markings. "This is one of our safe spots," she said. "It's not perfect, but it's better than the words died in her mouth." Rourke noticed it too. The faint sound of footsteps, slow and heavy, echoing from behind them. Not the quick, careless pace of a drunk. Not the nervous shuffle of someone avoiding trouble. These were deliberate, measured, hunting steps. Lyra's hand drifted toward the small pistol at her hip. "We've got company," she murmured. Rourke didn't turn immediately. Instead, he let his eyes shift to a reflection in a dirty metal panel on the wall. A tall, broad figure was moving into the alley. Reptilian, armored. A familiar silhouette from the feeds. Korr. Vec. The bounty hunter filled the mouth of the alley like a wall of muscle and scale. His claws gleamed in the weak light. His voice rumbled low. "Step away from the door, Deathworlder. You're worth more to me breathing, but I won't hesitate if you make me." Lyra shifted her weight slightly, her stance tense. "Oh, you'll have to go through me first." Korr's teeth flashed in a grin. "Fine by me." The next second exploded into motion. Korr lunged forward, faster than something his size had any right to be. Rourke shoved Lyra to the side just as the hunter's claws swiped through the air where her head had been. The sound of metal scraping against brick filled the alley. Rourke stepped in close, aiming a sharp punch toward Core's jaw. It landed. With a solid thud, but Core barely flinched. A reptilian slammed his shoulder into Rourke, knocking him back against the wall hard enough to make the metal panel shudder. You hit harder than most. Core growled, but not hard enough, Rourke ducked under the next swipe and drove his elbow into Core's ribs. This time, the hunter grunted, taking a half step back. Rourke pressed the advantage, hammering him with 2 more quick blows, but Core caught his arm in a crushing grip. The pressure was like steel closing around bone. Before Core could twist, Lyra fired. The shot cracked through the alley, a bright flash lighting up the shadows. The bolt caught Core in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. Roared in pain, releasing Rourke's arm. Rourke didn't waste the opening. He kicked Core's knee, forcing the big hunter to drop to one leg, and grabbed him by the head and slammed it into the wall. The impact left a dent in the metal. Core staggered back, shaking his head. Blood dripped from his lip, but his grin returned. This is going to be fun. Before he could come at them again, a sharp whistle cut through the air from the rooftops above.
Ice.
Something small and metallic dropped into the alley, bouncing once before releasing a thick cloud of smoke. Visibility vanished instantly. The smell was acrid, stinging Rourke's eyes. He heard movement, footsteps retreating fast. When the smoke cleared, Core was gone. Lyra lowered her pistol, eyes scanning the rooftops. "Someone just saved us, or stole our kill," Rourke muttered. They didn't have time to debate. In the distance, faint but growing louder, came the sound of engines, small, fast, and getting closer. Lyra cursed under her breath. "That'll be the others." She opened the safe house door and shoved Rourke inside. The interior was smaller, a single room with bare walls, a table, and 2 chairs. A cot sat in the corner. "Stay here," she said. "I'll sweep the street and make sure we weren't followed." Rourke stepped toward the window, pulling the curtain just enough to watch her disappear into the shadows outside. His knuckles ached from the fight, but his mind wasn't on the pain. Korvac had found him in less than a day. That meant others would too. And out there in the shifting darkness of the Undercity, he could feel eyes on him. It's more than one pair. The hunt was far from over. The Imperial Data Core was buried deep inside the heart of the Zerothi capital, a fortress of black steel and shimmering shields. From the outside, it looked like a perfect, smooth tower, no windows, no balconies, no easy entry points. Inside, it was worse. Layers of locked doors, scanning drones, and guards patrolled every hallway. That was where Rourke and Lyra were headed. They moved through the Undercity in silence, keeping to the darkest routes. Lyra had a small device strapped to her wrist, a rotating scanner that displayed pulses of blue light on a circular screen. Each pulse marked the sweep of a patrol. "Timing is everything," she whispered. "If we move too early, we'll walk right into a drone. Too late, and we'll hit the guard rotation." Rourke glanced at her. "You've done this before?" "Not with you," she said, "and not with a target this important." They reached the base of the tower through an old drainage tunnel. The air was damp and cold, the sound of dripping water echoing around them. Ahead, a circular hatch blocked the way, its lock panel glowing faintly. Lyra crouched beside it, pulled a cable from her pack, and slid one end into the panel. Her fingers danced over a keypad as faint beeps filled the tunnel. After a tense 30 seconds, the hatch slid open with a hiss. Inside was a narrow maintenance corridor, dimly lit by strips of pale light. The walls were lined with cables and vents. The hum of machinery filling the space. They slipped inside, sealing the hatch behind them. The plan was simple. Get in, reach the central data chamber, download the files, and get out before the alarm. Reached full lockdown, but plans rarely survived contact with reality. They were halfway to the first access point when Rourke froze. Faint footsteps, not patrol guards. They were too light, too careful. He glanced at Lyra and signaled for silence. She frowned, then nodded. Somewhere above them, on the maintenance catwalks, a shadow moved. The faint gleam of metal caught the corner of Rourke's eye. It was Vera. The masked bounty hunter moved like a phantom, gliding silently across the catwalk. Her mask reflected the pale lights and shifting patterns, making her shape hard to track. She was following them, but not attacking yet. Rourke kept walking, pretending not to notice, but every muscle was tight. Lyra whispered, "Problem." "Shadow on the roof," he murmured back. They reached the first security door, and Lyra plugged in her device again. As she worked, Rourke kept his eyes on the catwalks. Vera had vanished into the shadows. The door slid open, revealing a wide corridor with polished black floors and walls like mirrors. At the far end, a pair of guards in silver armor were talking quietly. Lyra signaled to wait. She pulled a small disc from her pack, pressed a button, and tossed it down the hall. Rolled silently before sticking to the wall. A faint pulse of light spread across the corridor, and both guards staggered before collapsing, their armor clanging against the floor. "EMP burst," she explained. "We'll kill them, but they'll be asleep for hours." They moved past. The guards, stepping over their still forms. The central chamber was close now. Rourke could feel it, the faint vibration in the floor from the massive data cores. The hum of power that filled the air. They turned a corner and stopped. Korvac stood in the middle of the hallway, claws flexing, eyes locked on Rourke. The big reptilian grinned. "You didn't think I'd let you come here without saying hello, did you?" Before Rourke could answer, Lyra grabbed his arm. "We don't have time for this." Kor lunged, swinging one massive arm toward Rourke's head. Rourke ducked, feeling the rush of air as the claws missed by inches. He countered with a sharp punch to Kore's ribs. The hunter barely reacted. Behind them, Vera dropped from the catwalk without a sound, landing in a crouch. She didn't join the fight. She moved toward the data chamber door, her focus entirely on her own goal. Rourke noticed and shouted, "Lyrador." Lyra turned, sprinting after Vera. The two women clashed near the panel, Vera's blade flashing in the dim light. Lyra ducked a slash, firing her pistol at point-blank range. The bolt hit Vera's mask, scorching the surface, but not breaking it. Rourke blocked another swing from Kor, twisting to drive a knee into the hunter's side. Kor roared and shoved him back, the force sending Rourke skidding across the polished floor. The fight was chaos. Two hunters, two infiltrators, and one objective that could change the galaxy. Then the alarms began. A deep, rumbling siren echoed. Through the corridors, red lights flashing along the walls, the entire tower shifted into lockdown mode. Rourke scrambled to his feet, grabbing a fallen shock baton from one of the unconscious guards. He swung it hard into Kor's leg, the jolt making the hunter stagger. "Move." Rourke shouted to Lyra. She managed to shove Vera back long enough to slap her device onto the data chamber door. It beeped rapidly, lights flickering. Kor roared again and came at Rourke, claws slashing. Rourke sidestepped, jamming the baton into the hunter's ribs. The smell of burnt flesh filled the air as Kor howled in pain. The door slid open, inside. Lyra yelled. They dove through just as the door began to close. Vera darted forward, but the heavy panel slammed shut before she could follow. The central chamber was massive, filled with towering columns of glowing data cores. The air was cold, and the hum of power was almost deafening. Lyra ran to the nearest terminal, plugging in her drive. "Keep watch," she said. "This will take a minute." Rourke positioned himself by the door, shock baton ready. Outside he could hear Kor pounding on the metal, his roars muffled, but still full of rage. Somewhere farther back, the sound of boots and drone wings echoed through the halls. Lyra's device beeped. "Got it," she said, yanking it free. "Time to leave," Rourke replied. But when the door slid open, the hallway beyond was empty. No Kor, no Vera. Rourke didn't trust it. They moved fast, retracing their path through the corridors. The alarm still blared, the lights still flashed. Every second felt like an hour. As they reached the maintenance corridor, Rourke spotted a shadow at the far end, Vera, watching silently. She didn't move to block them. She simply tilted her head as if memorizing their faces before melting back into the dark. Rourke didn't know why she'd let them go, and he didn't like it. They slipped out the hatch into the cold air of the drainage tunnel. Lyra sealed it behind them, breathing hard. "You got the files?" Rourke asked. She held up the drive. "Everything we need to burn the Empire to the ground." "Then we'd better be ready for the fire," he said. Somewhere, far above, the city roared with sirens, and in the shadows, the hunters weren't finished yet. The night air was cold and sharp as Rourke and Lyra emerged from the Undercity. They kept moving, staying in the narrow alleys where the street lamps barely reached. The drive-in liars. Pocket seemed to burn with importance. If they could get the files onto the galactic net, every species, every citizen, would see the truth about the Empire. But there was no safe house left. No allies close by. Only one option, the old Combs array at the edge of the industrial sector. Abandoned for years, but still linked to the deep relay channels. It was a long walk through dangerous streets. They moved fast. They weren't alone. Rourke kept scanning the rooftops and shadows. The city felt wrong, too quiet between the echoes of the distant sirens. Then, a sound, soft like metal sliding against stone. Rourke's hand closed on Lyra's arm. "We've got company." From the darkness above, Vera dropped onto the street. Ahead of them, her mask glinted in the dim light, the glowing lines shifting slowly like some alien script. She didn't speak. She simply stepped into the center of the alley, blocking the way forward. Before Rourke could react, heavy footsteps sounded from behind. Korvac emerged from the shadows, claws flexing, his eyes fixed on Rourke like a predator about to pounce. "End of the road," Kor rumbled. Lyra's hand went to her sidearm. "Not yet." A new voice cut through the tension. "All of you freeze." At the far mouth of the alley stood another figure, tall, armored in black plating with a crest of silver feathers. Rourke didn't know the name, but the stance and the insignia on the pauldron made it clear. A royal bounty officer. The kind they sent when they wanted results fast. In an instant, the air was heavy with threat. 3 hunters, all here for the same thing. Rourke's mind raced. If they fought, it would turn into a bloodbath, and the files would never make it to the relay. If they ran, they wouldn't get far. Vera moved first. A blur of motion as she leaped at the officer, blades flashing. The officer blocked with a metal forearm, sparks flying in the dark. Kor lunged at Rourke. Rourke ducked under the swing, grabbing Lyra's arm. "Move." They sprinted past Vera and the officer, who were locked in a storm of blows. The clang of metal rang through the alley. It's the sound of 2 professionals trying to end each other quickly. Kor roared behind them, charging after them on all fours like a beast. His claws scraped against the walls as he ran. The streets became a blur, corridors of steel and stone, smell of ozone and oil thick in the air. Finally, they saw at the Combs Tower. It rose from the industrial ruins like a jagged spear, its dishes rusted, but still intact. The control shack at its base was dark, but the faint hum of standby power buzzed in the air. They burst inside, slamming the door shut behind them. Room was small, filled with old consoles and tangled wires. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Lyra ran to the main panel, prying it open with her multi-tool. Sparks crackled as she forced the power into full activation. "This will take 2 minutes," she said. "Maybe less, if the system doesn't fight me." They didn't have 2 minutes. The door shook, violently, Kor pounding on it from outside. Each hit made the metal groan. Rourke grabbed an old pulse rifle from a rack on the wall. It was dusty. The battery almost dead. But it was better than nothing. He aimed at the door as it began to dent inward. Then the sound changed, no longer just Kor's pounding, but the clang of something metallic hitting the roof. Dust rained from the ceiling as footsteps moved overhead. Vera dropped through a vent. Landing silently in the corner of the room, she looked from Rourke to Lyra, then to the console. "Hand me the drive," she said through her modulator. "Not happening," Rourke replied. Rifle still raised. The door buckled, and Kor forced his way in with a roar. The room exploded into chaos. Rourke fired at Kor, the pulse bolt slamming into the hunter's shoulder. Kor didn't stop. He slammed Rourke into the wall, claws swiping inches from his face. Lyra was still at the console, typing furiously. 30 seconds, she yelled. Vera moved with surgical precision, sidestepping Core and kicking Rourke's rifle back toward him. She didn't care about the fight. She was heading for the console. Rourke lunged, tackling her before she could reach it. They rolled across the floor, her blade slicing through the air where his throat had been a second earlier. Core grabbed Rourke by the back of his jacket. Hauling him up like a sack of grain, Rourke kicked hard, twisting free. But the force sent him crashing into a console, sending sparks into the air. The panel in front of Lyra bipped a steady rising tone. Transmission live in 10 seconds. Vera stopped fighting. So did Core. All three of them looked at the console, realizing they were out of time. The officer from the alley appeared in the doorway. Dented armor still smoking from his fight with Vera, he raised a weapon unlike anything Rourke had seen. Before a sleek, silver tube with a faint blue glow. The hunter fired. The shot wasn't a bolted. It was a sphere of shimmering energy that expanded on impact, slamming into the console in a burst of white light. The hum of the relay died instantly. Lyra screamed in frustration, pounding the dead panel. Smoke filled the room. The old systems were fried. The officer stepped forward slowly, weapon aimed at Rourke. The files. Now, Vera tensed, her hands tightening on her blades. Core's claws flexed. No one moved for a heartbeat. Then, without warning, all three hunters attacked each other at once. Rourke didn't wait to see who won. He grabbed Lyra's arm, yanked her toward the back door, and kicked it open. They ran into the night, the sound of fighting still raging behind them. The comms tower was lost. Broadcast had failed. But the drive was still in Lyra's pocket. And as long as it was safe, the fight wasn't over. The city was alive with alarms. Somewhere behind them, the fight in the comms tower still raged, but Rourke and Lyra didn't look back. They sprinted through the dark streets, weaving between stacks of cargo and half-built scaffolds. The air was sharp with the smell of ozone and burning metal. Every corner they turned, sound of pursuit, followed boots on steel, claws scraping. The soft, silent movements of someone moving faster than the eye could track. Lyra led the way, breathing hard but steady. We make it to the docks, we can get off this rock. They'll follow, Rourke said between breaths. Not if we lose them in the freight lanes. The industrial sector gave way to the loading yards. Massive cranes loomed overhead, their shadows cutting across the floodlit ground. Cargo containers stood stacked like walls, painted with the symbols of dozens of alien trade guilds. The deep hum of idling freighter engines rolled through the air like distant thunder. A heavy clang echoed from behind them. Korvek dropped from a gantry onto the deck, landing hard enough to make the metal tremble.
Died.
His eyes locked on Rourke instantly. "I'm done playing," he snarled. From the shadows between two cargo stacks, Vera stepped out, blades already in hand. Her mask tilted toward Lyra. Then, from the top of a container, the black-armored officer appeared, aiming that strange silver weapon at all of them. 3 bounty hunters. 1 alley of escape. Lyra's eyes darted to Rourke. "We're not getting past them without a fight?" "Then we fight," Rourke said. The moment broke like glass. Core charged first, swinging a claw the size of a machete. Rourke sidestepped, grabbing a metal rod from the deck and slamming it into Core's ribs. The hunter roared, spinning to swipe again, but Rourke ducked low, ramming his shoulder into Core's gut. Vera moved like smoke, gliding past them toward Lyra. Her blade flashed, slicing a strand of Lyra's hair before the human ducked, and countered with a shot from her pistol. Vera twisted, the bolt grazing her side. The officer fired at both of them, the glowing sphere from his weapon exploding against a stack of cargo and sending shrapnel into the air. The noise echoed across the yard, drawing the attention of dock workers who quickly scattered. Rourke slammed the metal rod against Core's knee. The big hunter dropped with a snarl, grabbing Rourke and flinging him hard into a container wall. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he pushed off and came at Core again. Lyra was backing toward a loading platform, firing in quick bursts to keep Vera at bay. The masked assassin was relentless, her movements precise and deadly. Then Rourke saw at the ramp to a freighter being loaded with cargo. the engines already humming for departure. It was their only way out. "Lyra, the ship," he shouted. She caught his glance and nodded, firing one last shot before running for the ramp. Rourke followed, but Kor's massive hand closed around his arm, yanking him back. "Not so fast, Deathworlder." Rourke spun, driving an elbow into Kor's throat. The hunter staggered, but didn't let go. His grip tightened, claws starting to dig into Rourke's jacket. A sudden Blurvera lunged at Kor from the side, slashing deep into his arm. He released Rourke with a bellow of pain. For a second, Rourke thought she was helping him, but then her masked gaze locked on the drive. In Lyra's pocket, she wanted it just as badly as Kor did. The officer dropped down in front of the ramp, weapon raised. "Nobody leaves," he said coldly. The three bounty hunters turned their focus away from each other. For the first time, they moved in unison toward Rourke and Lyra. There was no more running. Rourke grabbed a length of heavy chain from a nearby crate, wrapping it around his fists. Lyra reloaded, the click of the pistol sharp in the tense air. They met the hunters head-on. Kor swung low, trying to take Rourke's legs, but the human jumped over the swipe and brought the chain down hard on the reptilian's skull. Vera's blade flashed toward Lyra's ribs, but Lyra twisted and fired point-blank, the bolt punching into Vera's shoulder. The officer's weapon discharged again, the blast throwing Rourke sideways, but he rolled and came up swinging, slamming the chain into the officer's arm and knocking the weapon free. It clattered to the deck. Kor roared and tackled Rourke, the two of them crashing into a stack of crates that collapsed in a spray of splinters. Vera went for the weapon, but Lyra got there first, kicking it across the deck and under the freighter's ramp. The ramp began to rise. The ship was leaving. Lyra ran for it, Rourke right behind her. Kor tried to follow, but the officer grabbed him, pulling him back in a sudden violent grapple. Vera leaped, her blade slicing the air where Lyra's back had been a heartbeat earlier. But she landed short as the ramp lifted out of reach. Rourke and Lyra stumbled onto the freighter's deck as the ramp sealed shut behind them. The hum of the engines deepened into a roar. The ship began to lift away from the dock through the viewport. Rourke saw the three hunters staring up at them, frustrated, furious, but still very much alive. "They'll come after us," Lyra said quietly. Rourke looked at her, then at the drive in her hand. "Then we make it worth their trouble." The freighter turned toward the blackness of space, leaving the city's lights far behind. The stars opened up before them, endless and cold. Somewhere out there, the rest of the galaxy was about to learn the truth. And Rourke knew when that happened, the real fight would begin.